Hi, this is Kathy Goodwin, coming to you today with a really cool topic. For your lead generation website, here are 5 effective components of your About page. Let's get something straight at the beginning. Your About page is not a job description. It's not a sentence of coach who does this, this, and this. It is not a bio. It's not the kind of bio that you submit when you're giving a talk and someone introduces you by reading your tombstone biography, or not something on the back of a book jacket. It is not a true confession story. What it is, it's a key part of your marketing, and it's a lead generator. So here are 5 tools to help you create an About page that contributes to the overall purpose of your website, which is primarily to generate leads. First, stories, and we'll go through each of these. Stories, testimonials, credentials, facts, and a call to action. So let's start with stories. The purpose of a story is to explain why you are uniquely qualified to serve your clients, and the emphasis is on unique. So you might tell your own how I got there story, but those are starting to backfire a little bit, because what we're seeing is people who tell this really heartrending story of how I was broke 5 years ago and I built myself up from nothing. But all too often, there are people around who knew these people 5 years ago. I mean, I know someone like that myself, who has this horror story of how she wasn't making any money and she was broke. But I remember she was not broke at all. She was doing extremely well. Thank you very much. So you have to make it extremely plausible, and you have to relate it directly to what your client wants. You need to show not only why your story is so dramatic or emotional or impressive, but how that story makes you better qualified to serve your clients. So it has to be credible. You don't want to give too much information. If you're a life coach who works with people who are getting over addiction problems or in recovery, then you might want to talk about how you were in AA, or you were indeed in Betty Ford Clinic, and you have dealt with your own addiction problems. But if you're a coach who works with business clients, then that might be TMI. I knew a business coach who had on her website for a long time a real horror story of how she grew up as a child. She was abused, she was on the streets, and now she's become a really effective, famous, successful business person. I noticed recently she has taken that story off her website, and I suspect she realized that's a little too much information, especially for business clients. So you want to have your success stories not only about you, but about your clients. Frankly, I think these success stories are extremely powerful, even more powerful than your own story. Because let's face it, if I'm going to hire you, I'm happy that you are doing well, and you've learned some things along the way about how to make things work for you. But what I really want to know is, how do you make things work for other people? Can you put yourself in their shoes? So testimonials are the second tool that you can use to create your About page. Testimonials serve the function of showing that your clients had a good experience working with you. They do 3 things. First, social proof. Social proof, we all, by now have heard of the book Influence. And what that means is that you tend to listen to someone who is like you. And you've heard that story in Cialdini's book, Influence, of the child who went to swimming, and the parents were saying, oh, well, you can learn to swim. And the instructor was saying, yeah, you can do it. And then one day the kid started swimming, and they said, well, what happened? And he said, well, I met another 6-year-old, and if he could do it and he's 6, I'm 6, I can do it too. So that's the same strategy that you're using with social proof with testimonials. You're saying, well, if this housewife who has, I know that's a stereotypical phrase, but if this stay-at-home mom has managed to build a business from 0 to $1 million, you can do it too. The challenge, of course, is that you have to show people who your client can resonate with. So you have testimonials from famous people, maybe that you've worked with, maybe you studied with, or you've hired as your own coaches. But what's really going to count are the testimonials from your own clients who actually resonate with the people you're trying to work with now. You want to show them on all pages, because testimonials are extremely critical, and they need to be sprinkled all over your site. I know I have a page that's testimonials, and I recommend you do that too, because when people come to your site, they want to see them all together. But I also recommend sprinkling them throughout the website so people see them as they go through. And finally, you need to edit your testimonials, because when people write testimonials for you, they don't always have the persuasive impact they need. For instance, someone says, wow, I really enjoyed talking to Teresa. She was really interesting and helpful. Hello, that's kind of a yawn, and it's not especially useful. It doesn't persuade very much. So don't be afraid to edit testimonials. And what I always do is I do this for my clients, I do this for me, is I'll edit, and then you can go back to the person who gave the testimonial and say, well, this is what I believe you said. Do you think this makes sense? Most people don't remember what they wrote the first time, and if they do, they don't care. I have never had anyone question a rewrite of a testimonial. Credentials are really important for many people, and I want to clarify what that means. It's not just about degrees. A credential says, whereas in contrast to a testimonial says your clients thought you were great. And what we're saying here is institutions and organizations, impersonal sources that have procedures to validate performances. Those are the people who have said that you are the real goods, that you really know your stuff and you're valid. So of course degrees are helpful. I've had people tell me to put my degrees everywhere, and sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, but degrees are definitely establish you. And they're also useful because if you have a client who has a certain level of degree, they will want to work with someone who is similar, so that will get you a foot in the door. Awards. Naturally, awards are a way of someone saying, hey, you passed our criteria, you're really great. Now, you may not think of this one, corporate jobs, but if you worked for IBM or General Motors or a really big company, McKinsey, one of those really big companies, then in a sense you have a credential, because those companies are extremely careful about who they hire. And if you had promotions, you stayed with them more five years or more, then you've had staying power, because they don't keep people around if they are not performing, if they're not up to snuff. So put down, your connections to Microsoft, your connections to Apple, your connections to any large company that has a strong reputation and that is known to be fussy about hiring. Big clients. Of course, if someone hired you who's got a big name, that you want to make sure everybody knows that. And articles about you, and that includes articles where someone featured you as a guest expert. You might want to put links to the publications where you appeared, because what that means is a journalist somehow found you and thought you were credible enough to quote. These are all extremely powerful credentials, because they're saying, hey, it's not just me. Other people who are total strangers, who are using impersonal, standardized processes, are saying I'm good. Facts. Now, what this means is, when you talk about yourself, a lot of people are afraid of bragging, but we want to make sure that you include facts, because they speak for themselves and they're very powerful, especially if they have statistics. So one of my facts is that many of my clients are marketing coaches themselves. That is a fact. It's true. I'm not bragging. I'm just stating a fact. But it says something about who I am and what I do and who I work with. Another example from someone else is 30% of my revenue comes from repeat clients. Okay, that's a fact. It's got a number behind it. And it really establishes something about you that you don't have to present as a brag. So let's look at a few examples of about pages that work very differently. This is Jeannie Spiro, who has a unique business. She works with people who are in corporate America, mostly women, but not all, and they may not all be in America, but they are women who are successful, have been in the corporate world for a long time, and now want to make the break to work for themselves. So she begins with her credentials, and she's done very well with this. So I have to say, you may hear me make suggestions, but anyone who's done copywriting is going to be wanting to tweak something, no matter how wonderful it is. And this is a very successful about page. She starts with her credentials and some facts. Over 13 years as an executive, over 10 years as a licensed benefits consultant, corporate training and speaking. She might even include a few examples of companies she spoke to. That would be my suggestion if she asked me. Certifications, and again, she probably has details here and there. Bachelor of Art, and that's a BA degree, and she might include her college if I were recommending this site. If she'd asked me for help, I would recommend that. And published writer and speaker, and again, that's something she talks about. Featured in the Grindstone, again, I would have a link to that, and expert contributor. But what's important here is she picked credentials that are directly related to what she does because she wants to help people move from corporate America to work on their own. So she understands benefits, which means she's going to be able to say to you, okay, you've been working for corporate America, you've got these awesome benefits in a package. Now you're going to work on your own. How are you going to make this happen? She can answer that question. She's been an executive at Blue Cross and Blue Shield and United Healthcare. She knows what it's like to work for a big company, and she knows what it's like to deal with bureaucracy of a big company. So these credentials are extremely important. And they also show she's competent. She's worked there for 13 years. I mean, you don't do that if you're a flake. And then she goes down here where we're talking about, I had no desire to climb the corporate ladder. Oops, let me go back. This is a story. And a story flows very nicely with Jeannie's position, because what she wants to do is show you that she is like you. She's like her own clients. And you're essentially, when you hire Jeannie, you're not so much hiring her skills, which are considerable, but you're also hiring her. And you need to know her background because that's extremely relevant. It explains why she is so unique. And what it explains is she started with a wake-up call in 2005. If you look here, oops, I don't know why this is doing this. When her boss died suddenly at work, devastated by her mentor, she realized she was heading down a similar path. And after years of juggling a 60-hour work week, long commute, addiction to caffeine, so on, she recognizes her boss's death was a sign. So within 2 weeks of his passing, she quit her job, took a double-digit pay cut, and she began to explore. So she's been there. She's been from corporate America to her own. And then she goes on, and this is all on one page. I've just picked the high points for you. But again, she talks about how she had yet another setback. She discovered she had violated a no-compete clause, or was accused of violating a no-compete clause, and she had to deal with that. And again, the reinvention began again. This is something she would have to decide whether to include, because it's not as directly relevant as some of the other things, but it works for her. The reinvention began, and then this is how people relate to her. They are reinventing themselves. So what she's got is a picture of herself and her husband. She's showing you that she's an ordinary person. She's got a husband, she's got a family, she does this. And she talks in detail about her program on health coaching. Light bulb went off what she does, and life changed when I attended my first live event. So she's got a major part of her about page is a story, which makes a lot of sense for her. She does have a call to action, but in this particular video, we're not going to go into it as much. But that's one example of a website. Now let's look at Chris Makel. And Chris has a totally different site, but it's interesting. She also comes from a corporate background, and she handles it very differently. And again, she's also extremely successful. She begins with a quote. Now, normally, I have to say this because if you ever work with me, you're going to hear me say no quotes. I don't recommend quotes from other people. But in her case, it makes some sense because that's really her. She's going to go on and say this is a guiding principle for her life and business. And again, this is something she would think about if she might want to think about that in some cases. But she's got really very compelling, cleverly worded narrative. She is fiercely committed to guiding entrepreneurs who are closet introverts. So many people can relate to that, and it's comfortable. Closet introverts is a very down-to-earth term that people relate to. Be a voice, not an echo, is a guiding principle. And she has a bit of a call to action right here if you're looking for a proven professional mentoring coach. Now notice she does not have a story. She briefly alludes to her background with over 5 years of experience of working with clients and helping them. She talks about this is her current business, nothing about her background. And then she says here she's using testimonials very effectively. Clients say remarkable things about the impact my work has, and it looks like she's done some editing on them also. So she's got pictures, very strong testimonials, and she's using that rather than the credentials listing that we saw Jeannie use. So in her case, this is working, whereas Jeannie did not have testimonials in her about page. Chris does. So there's no one way of doing this, and each fits in. And then what she does here, this is a really, really strong paragraph here. What sets me apart from other service providers is that I am like you, an introvert who had to learn to use my own voice. And more than anything, my work with you will focus on bringing out your brilliance. That's really, really very strong. And this is an about page. It's also generating leads. It's also promoting and selling very gracefully, without pressure. And then here's a link to a place where she's been featured. And this is really cool. What she's saying is 5 things about my experience and me that might surprise and delight you while serving our work together. A natural loner. This is cool. Have a natural curiosity. And she explains why that helps you. This is really good. This aspect of my personality helps me go deeper with you, uncovering your true distinction and how it affects the very best clients. So she's not only talking about her personality, she's being very explicit in showing how it's going to work for you. Fiercely loyal. This is really good. I'm going to hold nothing back. And then this is something extremely clever. She says, I don't like to stand still, which is why I was willing to move 6 times when working at IBM. She casually drops that she worked at IBM and she had 6 moves, which means usually almost always 5 promotions. I mean, she's done extremely well. She's chosen not to highlight that part of her background at this point in her business. Now, Jeannie is earlier in her business, so that may be why she is talking more about her corporate credentials. But this is she just kind of drops that in, and she drove 1,800 plus miles from Connecticut to Austin, Texas. And this is important because Chris likes to network locally, so she wants people to know she is in Austin. Whereas in my case, I just kind of mentioned, oh yeah, by the way, I'm in Philly, but I don't look for clients locally. I work on the internet. Even if you live across the street or next door, I'm going to ask you to work with me by phone and internet. So that's just a way of introducing herself to her target market. And then I like this. I think I'm funny. And she adds a little bit of personality at the bottom. And then she has a call to action again, which we're not going to go into in this. But if you're in need of a guide, training, or specific tools, she goes into that even more. This one, third one, is Ian Brody, who is also has a strong corporate background. And he has a totally different approach because he actually, I should say, it's kind of a gradation, because we saw Jeannie had a very strong story and personality, and we saw where Chris talked about herself and introduced herself, but Ian does not get into his personal stuff at all, except for a very brief mention towards the end. So about me and about this website. Notice what he's got is even though this is his about page, he starts right in. This is what my website is about. My goal is to help you understand what makes your clients tick, what motivates them to buy. I'm going to show you how to do this. And he goes right into a call to action, which is a request for you to sign up for his free email list, which is very good. I'm on it. And here is a little bit more on the same page about Ian Brody. And by the way, he is English. He has the most delightful accent. I could listen to him all day. But he says, starts with a credential and a fact. I've been helping some of the world's leading organizations with their marketing and sales for over 17 years. Walk the talk, sold multi-million-dollar consulting engagements across multiple countries and cultures. So he clearly establishes his background, but then he talks about a little more personal, why he is the right person for you, a little about his personality. Far from a natural salesperson, nasty surprise when I realized early on that in order to progress and do the work I was interested in, I would need to sell. I've learned how to do it, and my particular focus is working with small businesses. I've been astounded at the depth of talent and passion. And this is a really nice touch because he's paying homage to his clients and saying he respects them, which he does. He's one of the most respectful marketing consultants I've seen on the internet or anywhere. And yet I've also seen how many of these businesses are struggling or failing to live up to their potential simply because they haven't cracked the marketing and selling. And this photo is really also kind of cool because it's a real photo of him not dressed up in a big suit, kind of casual and friendly, but also professional. And he's got a really friendly, I think, well, you can decide. It seems like a friendly look. I've made it my mission, and again, to help solo practitioners and small firms. If you like what you've heard so far, another call to action down here. So you see what's happened is this website is much more about marketing. He's really walking the talk, and he's showing you by example that he's a marketer. And then the only thing he says, again, you've got a little bit of a call to action. If you like what you heard so far, contact form. And then all he has about himself is, on a personal note, I'm married to the wonderful Kathy with a K. We have 2 children, Chris and Robs. And I also, this is a little personal touch too, I suffer from being a supporter of Newcastle United. Now, for English people, this is extremely meaningful because I gather there's 2 teams. There's Newcastle United and there's another one that's a big rival. So naturally, this is a way to engage his market. In the U.S., if you're reaching a more American audience, you might talk about something like being a fan of the Yankees or about your own college background. For example, I spent a year visiting at University of Florida. So when I say go Gators, a lot of people really resonate to that. Or they say, well, I went to FSU, Seminole, so we're, sorry, we're different. But something like that gives you something to talk with. And that's a nice personal touch because you want something. I'm amazed at how many people have hired me based on some very small personal fact that's in my About page or elsewhere on my website. And then he's got at the end, somewhat modestly, but these are testimonials and also credentials. When someone says, here, one of the top 50 global thought leaders by Top Sales World magazine. This is a credential. This looks like a very brief testimonials. This is one of the top sales influencers, another credential, and this is another testimonial by someone. And again, it's important to have some information about who's giving you the testimonials. It's difficult if you're in a sensitive area, but Mary H doesn't cut it these days, except if you're in this very sensitive area, you may have to put a note about it. But notice he's got some very, very simple testimonials. A smart man, a rainmaking expert, low-key self-effacing style, below somebody content mastery. This is really, really good. So this is, as you would expect, a really very marketing-oriented site, totally different. So what we've seen here are three people from corporate backgrounds, different stages in their business, using their About pages very differently, using the ingredients of an About page differently and very successfully. So if you'd like to explore further, you can consult with me. These are the links. This is my consultation if you want to develop a lead generation About page. I also have as an offer, an About page done for you. DFY stands for done for you, where I will actually write it for you, and I will actually work with you. We can actually take care of your whole website and deliver it in a WordPress format. So if you're a very busy person, if you've got more clients than you can handle, or if you realize this is not a good use of your time, then it's a good idea to turn it over to someone else. The people I work for usually end up loving their About pages, because one of the things we do is we find qualities that you have that you may not have been aware of. Because one of the reasons people respond to you, people sign up for your e-zine, people become prospects, is that they resonate to an important quality that you have. So when people say, well, I want you to write my About page, it's not about just transferring your speaker's bio to the website. It's about identifying the qualities you have that will resonate most with your unique target market and finding out the ways that you are unique. A lot of times when I work with clients, they're surprised at just how special and unique they really are. So I would love to talk to you further if you're interested in moving in this direction. So thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to meeting you on a future video or perhaps a one-to-one consulting call. You can go to my services page, which is listed here, and get an overview of what I offer in general. Thanks again for joining me, and have a wonderful day.